Today on AeroTime, we will be meeting an ambassador, pilot, podcaster, mother, non-profit founder, and STEM advocate, and a woman who is encouraging the next generation to dream big and to let their dreams soar. Shaesta Waiz became the youngest woman to fly solo around the world in a single engine in 2017. The global flight was launched through her non-profit Dream Soar, which aims to inspire the next generation of STEM and aviation professionals. Through her nonprofit, she has already reached over 25,000 children. And in 2019, Dream Soar awarded their first flight scholarship to a young woman pilot. Today, she serves as a STEM ambassador to the Federal Aviation Authority, and she is the host of the Aviate with Shaesta podcast. Shaesta, hello, it's great to see you, and thank you for joining us here today.
Hi, Richard. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Thank you for being here. And Shaesta, I always like to go right back to the very start with these interviews. And I like to ask my guest to tell their story about how they came to aviation. And to say that your start in life was turbulent is a bit of an understatement. You were born in a refugee camp. Your family fled from Afghanistan and arrived in the USA in 1987. You then grew up in California and attended school in an underprivileged neighborhood. But you found your way to aviation. So tell us, how did that happen?
Well, thank you, Richard. And yes, you are correct. I originally am from Afghanistan. My family and we came to America when I was just a few months old. Of course, I don't remember that experience or even the journey and the flight here to the US. But I grew up in an area where there were a lot of refugees. It was just really an underprivileged, underserved city that the school district was just struggling. So growing up, I remember having a lot of substitute teachers, not having like books and stuff to take home. Everything was just very limited. English was my third language. I grew up speaking Pashto and Farsi at home. And my parents had this idea that we were going to go back to Afghanistan once, the war was done. And so they held on to their Afghan traditions in terms of like the food we ate and the holidays that we celebrated. And so I just, I didn't take school very serious. And I just had this idea that I was going to get married at a young age and have a big family like my mom and women generations before her. And then when I got to high school, I was just graduated, 17 years old, got into a Delta Airlines flight. This was the first time I was traveling outside of when I was a baby coming to America. And so I was traveling by myself. I was going from California to Florida to visit my cousins who were there. And I really didn't know anything. I didn't know what a gate was. It just seemed like I was in a foreign country. But eventually I made my way to the back of the airplane in a middle seat, like one of the places that people don't want to be. And as the passenger there on this particular flight, I fell in love with aviation. And it really happened when we started to take off and just being elevated and having this perspective of the city that I grew up in and how small it was compared to, the rest of the world. And I just love that I was always being elevated. I was flying forward. It was just such a eye-opening experience. And I just fell in love with it. I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that flight gave me the confidence, the inspiration, the motivation to go to college and take education serious and pursue a career as a pilot.
So you certainly did that, and you actually went on to get your master's in aviation.
Yes.
You then flew around the world solo. You've become an advocate for women in aviation, among so many other things that I could list here. In fact, everything about your life is now interwoven with aviation. You even married an airline pilot. So, this industry has become incredibly important to you. What does it mean to you today?
It's everything. And I have to say, Richard, the reason why I immersed myself wholeheartedly in aviation is that if you would have met me, when I was 17, I was just extremely shy. And I just felt like, women couldn't do great things. Women, especially women with my background, couldn't fly airplanes. And what was so amazing to me is when I started to fly and when I got my private pilot's license, and I could officially be the pilot of command of the aircraft, what that gave me was just this sense of like just purpose and leadership. And what I loved about flying in general is that it's such an unbiased environment. It didn't matter when I flew the aircraft where I was from, what my background was, if I was a refugee or, even my socioeconomics. None of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was my ability to fly that aircraft. And I felt like I could truly be myself and not be judged or, any of those things. And so when I experienced that level of just belonging and purpose, I wanted to just continue to be in aviation and surround myself with it and take it a step further and like share this message with other young people around the world to consider aviation as a career.
And I mean, you've certainly done that in so many different ways. But I mean, I think that round the world solo flight was huge. You have that aviation record for being the youngest woman to undertake this journey. So tell us about that adventure, about the highs and the lows of flying in a single engine aircraft all the way around the planet.
So, my story in aviation, everything has been so non-traditional, so different than, the usual. I found aviation very late in life, and then I went on to study. And during my bachelor's degree, I had the chance to intern with a major airline as the chief pilot intern here in the US. And it was an incredible experience. I got to sit in the flight deck. I got to jump seat a lot all over the US and really like get a good taste of what it meant to be an airline pilot. And that was important because I went into aviation wanting to be an airline pilot. And then I quickly realized that I have so many ideas. There was no way that I could sit and like fly these airline routes and, that would just be my career. I had this sense of duty that I was so lucky to get into aviation that I needed to like do something with that, go out there and inspire people to follow this incredible industry. And so like I kept thinking, okay, what do I want to do? I was too old to join the military. And I thought, gosh, if I could do anything in aviation, I would love to get into an airplane and fly it around the world and meet with young people and talk to them about aviation. And then I just thought, well, what's stopping me from doing that? And so I started my nonprofit Dream Soar back in 2016. And I didn't want to just fly around the world and that would be it. I thought like, ideally, I would love to land in countries along the way and really connect with young people. And so all of this went into planning. To be quite honest with you, Richard, it took 5 years to plan, fundraise, and execute this flight. It took patience, it took time, it took dedication. But what was really incredible is the whole industry came together to support this initiative. You had competitors coming together to really help me get around the world. And when I went around the world, I got to meet with 3,000 kids face to face, and we had created content to introduce these kids to careers in STEM and aviation. So there were outreach events organized around most of the stops. And, the highs were really like, I remember when I was flying across the Atlantic Ocean, when I got to my point of no return, halfway through the flight, I like finally looked up and I had like a moment to just be there at 7,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean. And I thought, my gosh, in the history of aviation, only 7 women have ever crossed this ocean in a single engine airplane. And who would have thought the 8th woman would be a woman from Afghanistan, a refugee, one of 6 daughters, who is terribly shy, probably one of the worst students, in the school system. But because I applied myself and I found something that I loved, there I was setting a world record of being the 8th. So it was moments like that. And then the lows was, it was 145 days, 5 continents, 25,000 nautical miles. And I knew a lot of young people were looking and watching me. And safety was always the biggest thing. I kept thinking, if I am not safe and smart about, how I operate this aircraft or the decisions that I make, it could be, God forbid, detrimental, and it could have the opposite effect on young people, and they might be afraid to pursue aviation. So just the stress, I think, of the trip, it played on my mental health, I feel like, and it was just tough to just come back and resettle into normal life. But of course, it took time, and I worked on it. And yeah, it was just an adventure of a lifetime. It was just incredible.
I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. Honestly, what you've just described terrifies me, thinking about being on my own in a Cessna or a Piper or something halfway across the Atlantic at 7,000 feet. Honestly,
Yeah.
dream come true in some respects, but absolutely terrifying. And you've become a role model, and you have huge responsibility that goes along with your position today as that role model, and as a leader, as an advocate, as an ambassador. And you just talked about safety and knowing that you had to get that right during this amazing adventure. But how seriously do you take that responsibility now of being that role model in an industry that is still changing, that is still moving, that still has huge innovation going on, but that still has room for more equality across it? How do you feel about your position there now?
I carry it like a badge of honor. And I also, every time I go and meet with young people or I speak at an event, I always remind myself of like, what did I need at that age when I just got into aviation, and I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me. Like, what did I need? And I tried to give that, when I meet young women who come from a different background. And I think as a role model, you just have to be very approachable. The ego has to go away. They already think you're so cool, and just really connecting with people and just making them feel like they can do this, they can fly, they can be in aviation, even though it's a very male-dominated industry. And so I'm very privileged that I get to be a role model, and hopefully just serve this role and reach people who wouldn't normally think aviation is a possibility.
And I guess today you have two, or probably many, many other roles as well, but two specific roles I can think of now that allow you to do that. One of them, of course, is through your nonprofit Dream Soar that you founded in 2016 and has already done amazing things, but also another one of your roles where you're an ambassador for the Federal Aviation Authority. How do you want to use those particular platforms that you have, and what's your focus for today?
So it was quite an honor when I became an ambassador for the FAA, because they had never had a woman ambassador, and I was the first. So that was really special. And what I really admire about this position is that the FAA, they are trying to reach more young people. They're trying to make just the whole regulation and the work that they do, make it more just easily accessible, and just for people to think of the FAA as their friend, because at the end of the day, we're all here because we love flying, we love aviation, and we just want to make sure it's all safe for us to do so. So it's a role that I'm really excited about. I get to learn a lot about what are the goals of the FAA and how they plan on accomplishing those goals. And it's great for me because through my nonprofit, I'm able to kind of implement a lot of the things where we need, more movement or improvement. So it really works well hand in hand to be in these two roles, and then have the ability to connect with young people and share these messages.
And talking about sharing messages, you try to share messages on a number of different platforms through a number of different channels. You have your own podcast, Aviate with Shaesta. What exactly is it that you want to achieve through the podcast? Because you encourage women to come and talk to you about their role in the industry. You encourage people to come and share their challenges. It's a very sort of open approach to that podcast. But what's the long-term goal there?
So, Richard, one thing that I did not expect as I was going around the world, because I was so focused on, okay, we're going to reach young people, we're going to talk to them, we're going to get them excited. But what was happening as I went around to the 22 different countries is, all the time after the event, you would have a group of young kids come and, say how excited and inspired they are. But there was also a handful of women that would come up, and they were, women who were either starting flight training or they were in aviation in one capacity or another. And it was very interesting for me to observe that their questions were all very similar. And I just felt like a lot of the dialogue around women in aviation is about like the great work that we're doing. It's very inspirational, but I felt like we were doing a bit of a disservice by not sharing the whole light of experiences we go through as women in aviation. And so like when I would talk to a lot of young women that were resistant to getting into aviation, even though they had a passion for it, it was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen when I become a mom, or it's a very male dominated industry. I don't know how I'm going to pursue my leadership passions, climbing up the ladder when I'm competing against so many men. So there was just, all of these really important topics. And so I thought, you know what, rather than like me this time going around the world, let's take these conversations through podcasts. Podcasting is so powerful because it's accessible around the world, and you have the direct ability to speak to your audience in a very intimate way by them listening close to their ears. So that was the goal, is let's talk to women leaders. Let's talk to women in aviation about how did they manage their mental health, motherhood, pivoting, climbing the corporate ladder, just bringing these dialogues forward so that women, if they are experiencing any of these things, they have a conversation they can reference, or tools or resources. So I always go back, what did I wish I had when I was in aviation? And this was it. I wanted to know how other women did it. And so I thought, like, this is something I want to bring to women around the world who have a passion in aviation, because these conversations can really help them just navigate their careers.
And I think that we should applaud the innovation and the work that you're doing there, because encouraging that debate and encouraging people to share their experiences and those challenges will help them, and it will help others as well. I have to ask you, Shaesta, yeah. I'm hoping that during these podcasts you also get people who are sharing very positive and encouraging experiences about their life in aviation.
Yeah, so they're all framed not to just like be down or make you feel, worse. It's all framed for us to be very transparent about an experience. And a lot of the questions that I ask the guests is, what did you do to come out of it? What did you do to move forward from it? So it's really the focus on this event happened. What did you do to progress and keep going? So a lot of it is, almost all of it is very positive and resourceful and just gives perspective to people. I rarely go down the path of it being negative or just, I want people to walk away with these conversations, just inspired, and you feel like you have just a better understanding of what it means to be a woman in aviation and what you can do to really support yourself in this industry.
And I know for a fact that there are many people who have come to and listened to your podcast who find them inspirational, find them helpful, find them encouraging. So again, thank you for everything that you're doing. And of course, you'll be aware of a number of other initiatives like that, where people are trying to encourage women and the next generation of girls to come into the industry. But do you think that the aviation industry is actually doing enough to tackle the issues around equality? And if there was one more thing, that you would like to see happening right now, what would that be?
So, I feel like as an industry, we're doing really well in terms of bringing awareness. The FAA came out with a Women in Aviation board that really dissected just the challenges that the women have in aviation, and diving deeper into some of those problems and offering recommendations. So I thought that was very powerful, and you can see across the board companies are promoting more women. So it's really good to just see the progress. It's very hopeful, but there's certainly so much more that we need to do. One thing that I noticed is that right now we have women in leadership. But when you look at like the organizational chart to see, okay, when this woman moves on or goes to a different company or retires, who's going to fill her shoes? Like, how does the pipeline of women to those leadership positions will look like? You might have a person there now, but what about the future? So I think, just being mindful of not just now, but making decisions and implementing things that's just going to continue this trend of having a more balanced industry in terms of gender, and just giving that sense of belonging for women, that they can be in aviation, be themselves, and have just the runway for them to explore their careers and advance as they would like.
Brilliant. It's just, I mean, honestly, it's just inspirational hearing you talk about this. And again, I know there's lots of people who appreciate all of your efforts, and people who have asked us to come to you and to interview you because of this. So I think it's important to give that feedback, and I want you to know that. I'm going to go right back to basics now on the aviation side of things. I've got 2 more questions for you, which are very, very important. The first one is, what is your favorite aircraft?
Oh, without a doubt, Beechcraft Bonanza, the one I flew around the world, that I've created such an amazing bond with.
I think you'd be in trouble if you said anything other than that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we spent 140 something days with this aircraft all around the world. I mean, it couldn't be anything else. So I'm sure no one will be surprised by that. And also this next question, the last question, I mean, I'm not entirely sure I even need to ask you, but what has been your favorite aviation experience?
Gosh, there's been so many. Like in terms of flying, or just in general?
Anything, your favorite one, or your favorite 2, it doesn't matter, but just what's really, I think you've already told us 2 or 3 of them, but what's the favorite one?
So I think, having this experience of flying around the world, and having the work that we're doing with the Aviate platform really inspiring and connecting with women. I think one of my favorite moments is right now, because we took a lot of time when the global flight completed. We went on to do a total of 60 outreach events. This is Dream Soar. We got to meet with 25,000 kids face to face. This was, in over 30 countries. And so that was really amazing to meet all of these young people and get them excited about aviation. But the one thing that was really tough, Richard, to answer was when you would have someone come up to you and say, I'm inspired, where can I go to learn more? It was tough because the question was never standard. It was like, okay, well, what part of the world do you live in? Do you want to become a pilot or something else? We as an industry, we don't have like a one-stop shop hub to direct young people. So right now, what our nonprofit is working on is becoming that industry hub. And our idea is let's give young people the ability to go online, have access to aviation, as long as they have access to internet and a computer or their phones, and present content that's just really interesting and rich, and give them the ability to explore. I believe there's over 900 aviation sectors within the industry. So usually young people only hear about pilots or mechanics, but what about all of the other exciting careers in aviation? So we're building this hub where young people can go and explore these different careers. And then once they decide what they want to do, the next part of this hub is building a bridge program where they are then bridged to that career field, and they know exactly all of the steps to take to get there. So I think this is going to serve the industry so well, and it's going to be such a tool for young people who have an interest in aviation to get to learn more about this incredible industry. And it's just exciting to be on the solution side. It was the beginning with the advocacy side, and now we're at the solution side, and we're really providing something that I think is going to help a lot of young people out there.
I don't think I or anybody else watching has any doubt about that. And I think you're already helping an awful lot of young people to follow their dreams, to dream big, to allow their dreams to soar, as you said. And I think this interview has covered a lot of ground. You've been able to tell us a lot of your stories. We've heard a lot that brings me to the next part of this interview, because of all the things you've told us about, just because of all of the things that you've achieved already in your life and the encouragement that you're giving to the next generation. In honor of our 2-year anniversary of the AeroTime Women in Aviation campaign, I am very happy to be able to present to you, Shaesta, with the latest AeroTime Aviation Achievement Award. And this award is made by the Global Executive Committee of AeroTime, and it is in honor and recognition of the work that you have done to date, your achievements, but also for everything that I'm quite sure after this conversation you will carry on going on to do in the future. And if I can, I'm just going to read very quickly the citation.
Yes, please.
It says, presented to Shaesta Waiz, founder and CEO, Dream Soar, STEM ambassador to the Federal Aviation Administration, in recognition of her contribution to the aviation sector and for highlighting opportunities for young women by becoming the youngest female pilot to fly solo around the world in a single-engine aircraft, for her advocacy and devotion to inspiring and supporting the next generation of STEM and aviation professionals through Dream Soar, and as an ambassador to the Federal Aviation Administration. The AeroTime Global Executive Committee recognizes the significance and positive influence of these efforts on the aviation industry and its people, both today and into the future. So Shaesta, congratulations on becoming the latest recipient of this award.
Wow.
Thank you so much for everything
Wow.
you've done, and we'll make sure that this comes over to you just as quickly as we can.
What a surprise. And I really appreciate all of the work you guys are doing to highlight women who are doing the important work in our industry, and all of the work that you guys are doing for the industry. This really means a lot to me, and I appreciate it a lot.
Well, Shaesta, thank you so much. We appreciate you too. Thank you for joining us here on AeroTime. That's all we have time for today. My name is Richard Stevenson, and you've been watching AeroTime. Thank you and goodbye.